Morning fam, this is going to be part 2 of the video that I did yesterday talking about healthy boundaries and staying firm to your boundaries. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that occurred during my past, during this long period that I've survived of defamation and slander, and the financial impacts and other impacts it's had on me. And I want to talk about certain things that took place with people that I no longer allowed to have any access to me. So when it came to my ex's mother, who was extremely boundary violating, and her behavior illustrates that she has extreme problems with emotional incest, and the way that manifested in what I witnessed her doing was there were numerous things that she did. One incident I remember is I was working at the time, and there were going to be pictures at the mall with Santa, and my son, I really wanted to be there to see his very first pictures with Santa, and this had already been pre-planned that I would leave work and go be there before he had his pictures with Santa. So I'm texting and on the phone, on my cell phone, saying like I'm on the way to get to the mall for this to happen. I left work to do this, and as I get there, his mom and his stepdad had orchestrated this whole thing to take place. I think, I don't know, maybe to get a negative reaction out of me, because they are psychologically abusive people, and his stepfather has passed, and I think the world is better for that, so I'm just going to put that out there. But I had asked several times for them to just hold him back in the line until I could get there. I was on my way. When I get there, his mom had sent my son through the line with Santa, with just her being there, his stepdad being there, and him being there. And I was devastated, because this was like kind of a milestone moment for me that I really wanted to be able to witness, and she stole that from me. It was not the first time that she stole something from me, but it was definitely one that sat with me. And I went and sat down with him at a diner afterwards, and we talked, and I said, if you're going to constantly side with her over me, then you're going to be married to her and not me. Because he couldn't understand that him constantly deferring to her when it came to my needs as a mother was not only abusive, but it was dysfunctional. And that was just one incident that occurred. There were several, but that was one that really stuck with me for a long time. At one point, I was an extra in the show Turn, and when I was fully in costume to do what I was required to do in that production, she had already previously agreed to watch my kids, and she calls me while I'm on set and says she just can't be bothered to watch my kids anymore, and I need to come and get them. Knowing that I would have to leave set where I was, which was going to cost the production money, she was so arrogant in her entitlement that she felt like it wasn't necessary to do what she had agreed to do when it was impacting a bunch of other people. So it wasn't enough that she was impacting me in a negative way, which I think was ultimately her goal. She also had no consideration for the fact that she was impacting an entire production. So this is just the level of egotism and arrogance that this woman had. When I was pregnant with my son and did not want to marry her son, she pressured me. She did a lot of things to manipulate my psyche, to try to guilt me into going along with something that in my gut I think I knew was the wrong decision, and ultimately it did dissolve. But when I was pregnant with my son, I expressed to her that I did not want to get married to him. I didn't want to be cruel in the way that I said it. I didn't want to say this because I thought we were unequally yoked, and that talking to him was like having a chemical lobotomy because his intelligence was just not there. And I couldn't have conversations with him where I was intellectually stimulated because he lacked the capacity for that. So that was one aspect of it, but I wasn't going to voice that to her because I was trying to be considerate of her feelings, which is kind of ironic considering that she was never considerate of mine. And when I told her, well, I just don't want to get married, I don't have the means, I don't have the finances for that right now. And so to overcome that objection, she said, oh, that's okay, I'll pay for it. And I thought that that was kind of insane, like she wasn't really hearing me. And then I was hearing things like she didn't want to have a bastard grandchild, so I had this religious guilt that I was contending with. And so ultimately, against my better judgment and against my gut instinct that he was a toxic individual that I needed to steer far away from, I did go through with this more than a decade ago. And you know, it's been several years since the divorce, but initially when that occurred, I just remember feeling like the entire scene was very odd because I tried to get him to participate in some aspect as far as like the planning. I tried to get him to, you know, pick out things, and he was completely unwilling to really go along and pick out the basic things like a shirt that he needed for it. It didn't take place in a church. It took place in a restaurant. It was not a place I would have chosen, and I had no say in the matter. I was not consulted in where it took place, and this is how I kind of want to illustrate the boundary violating. So even though she agreed to pay for it, you would still think she would want some input from me about, you know, how I would like it to look, you know, something along those lines. But what I realized about her was her controlling nature was such that she took it upon herself to plan everything. She picked out the cake, she picked out the venue, she picked out the table settings. She basically set it up as if it were her own wedding. And the reason I wanted to discuss this is a perfect example of very extreme and dysfunctional emotional incest. In the way that she did all of these things, it was as if she married her son, because I had so little involvement beyond picking out my dress and picking out a shirt for him. Outside of that, she did not really enable me to have very much input. I think I was permitted to pick out the cake topper, but beyond that, I just was not given the opportunity to have any kind of influence over that situation. And that pattern in her behavior continued, and it escalated over time. And you know, from the previous examples I discussed in this video, I hope you can see how when you're dealing with someone who doesn't respect other people's boundaries and tries to constantly erode them, you have to understand that any spawn they have are going to function the same way. So in the same way that she was extremely abusive and boundary violating, her son was equally abusive and boundary violating, and felt entitled to other people's time, their energy, their efforts, felt entitled to defraud them, felt entitled to basically labor traffic them, to human traffic them. And you might think that me using those terms is maybe excessive, but if you knew all of the details of what was done to me, you would understand that that is the perfect description for what these people put me through. And I have never been more at peace since I have been away from them and no longer have them directly impacting my life on a daily basis. I've recovered so much since they've been away from me. And it's a process. It's an ongoing process, and it'll continue to be. But every day gets a little bit better without them in my life. I miss my children.